Well, I told you he was coming on the show, and he's here, Dr. Paul Murano. Paul, thank you so much for joining us on The Good Place.
It's great to be in a good place, Kim.
Yes, it is. I'm feeling kind of silly. I think we are in a good place. Okay, I just want to share a little bit of background of yours to viewers who may not be familiar with what all you've done. And of course, I found this on the internet. Some of it I knew
Ah,
myself,
it's
but
all lies.
but they sound so good.
Okay, then we'll go with it.
We're going to run with them.
Yeah, yeah,
So, Paul has two master's degrees, one in philosophy and one in theology, correct?
yeah,
You have a background in teaching colleges and universities,
yeah.
hosting radio and TV programs, writing monthly columns for a regional newspaper. So far, all true, as far as I know. Uh,
I'll
Paul,
attest to that.
Paul is married. That I know to be true, to
Yeah.
someone very lovely. He is an avid New England sports fan. And if that
Mm.
weren't enough, a singer, songwriter, musician. He sings a mean, sweet Caroline. Um,
Ooh,
and actually, there's more. Wait, there's more.
ooh,
When I
wow.
looked up, I'm just going to say it right now, the book that you wrote that was released that we're going to talk about a little bit later. Okay. I'm letting the cat out of the bag, but we're not going to dive into that right now. I did look at the back of the book.
Yeah, that's
And okay, I want to add to that bio, which was so nice. Paul is a lifelong truth seeker,
mm,
and he has a bioethics certification. Oh, my phone is not cooperating. It won't scroll.
uh,
From from where, Paul?
National Catholic Bioethics Center.
That's it. And you are going to be awarded a PhD in philosophy in March. Now, how did this happen? And why didn't I know about this? This is amazing.
Actually, I've been working on it for about 3 years, and nobody knew about it except for my wife because I know how difficult it is to do such a thing. Not only with the content itself, but with many of the teachers and professors out there who are a little less than lovers of reason and lovers of truth. So I didn't tell anybody but my wife because I just wanted to, hold off until I actually got it. But I'm scheduled to get it in March.
Well,
So
congratulations early. And so you were working on this the whole time that you and I were at Church Militant then,
yeah,
which for I think a lot of people watching probably know that you and I worked together at Church Militant. I was there for a couple years and worked with Paul during that entire time. And you were there, Paul, a bit longer. When did you start there?
around November of 19. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. And then, as I mentioned in my previous episode, you and I got laid off together. So March
yeah.
1st. And who knows, that must have been a real blessing. You had plenty of time to work on
Oh,
your new degree.
you have no idea. You have no idea how much of a blessing that was on so many levels. But yeah, I was working on that. I was working on my new book. Actually, I was working on around 3 books, one of which it just got published. The other two will probably get published in turn. But yeah, it's given me a lot of time to do what I've been wanting to do and needing to do for a long time.
Okay. I would like to know, in addition to writing your books, well, I was going to ask what all have you been doing since March 31st, but I'm guessing studying, writing is probably the
Stud,
brunt of it,
stud,
right?
yeah, writing, going to the gym, going to daily mass, hopefully most of the time,
That's awesome.
and looking around for suitable work and working on my yard, trying to sell my house, whole bunch of things.
So it
Whole
really
bunch,
doesn't sound
yeah.
like much of anything at all. You've been sitting around doing nothing,
Yeah,
watching sports on
yeah,
TV.
yeah, watching sports. Yeah, I got to go to a Detroit Lions game.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, and also a Tigers game in the summertime.
Fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I went to more recently to the Motown Museum, which is really fun.
Okay. Haven't made
Uh,
it there yet. Randy and I would like
yeah,
to
yeah,
go.
it's really good. And of course, one of those Ford museums too. So I've been doing a little of everything and a lot of nothing. No, just kidding.
People would always talk about like, oh, why would you go to Michigan and work in Detroit? Work at Church Militant there in Detroit. And actually, Detroit's a pretty cool
Yeah.
city. I mean, there's a lot to do here. So I'm encouraging anyone who's watching who's never been, don't be afraid to come. You might want to pack heat, but you'll
Well,
be okay.
it's a mixed bag. Like virtually everything. It's a mix. There's good and bad.
That is true. That
Yeah.
is true. Well, for those who may not know that you were at Church Militant, could you share just a little bit about what your role was, some of the responsibilities you had there?
Well, when I was hired, I was kind of under the impression that I was going to come, to uproot myself and come to Detroit to evangelize. And I was pretty excited about that. I got there, and most of what I was doing news copy and writing news articles, and they were really big on the news at that time that I was there. So I didn't thoroughly enjoy it. Obviously, it's not where my gifts and talents lie. Um, I enjoyed being on the download most of the time.
Mhm.
Um,
I think that really highlighted your gifts and abilities because you got to get into theology more deeply and
the download,
explore.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, sometimes the download was over scripted, so there wasn't really much room for that. But when it was a little less scripted, I agree with you. And
Mhm.
towards the end, I just remember a lot of people, really commented on some of the shows that I hosted with William,
Mhm.
and other people. So yeah, it was good. It was good.
They
That
didn't
that
let me
that
on the download too much, and I don't think
I don't know why. Well, you
I
have
do.
the quintessential voice. And I'm not even going to say for anything because you have the quintessential voice for everything. And
Oh,
it
thank you, Paul.
you'd be a great radio person, and I know you've done that in the past. You were great on the news. Thanks be to God, you are hired and you took my place because they were putting me on the news as a news reader. Hello and welcome to Church Militant Evening News this Wednesday, June 30th, 2021. I'm your host, Paul Murano, coming to you live from our studios here in Detroit. And that's the last thing that I like and can do well is to read off a prompter for a half hour straight. So you relieved me of that when you came to Church Militant.
That's right. When I came
Yeah.
on board and I was hired to do news, Paul was the official news anchor, backup news anchor for Michael Voris. And so he was out quite a bit. It seems like when I first
Yeah, he was out a lot at that time, but there were a few of us doing it. But yeah, they had me doing it quite a few times at that particular point. And I
yeah.
think, yeah,
Would you say any of it helped you with where you want to go and what do you want to do in the future? What are you aiming for?
I can't measure whether any of it truly helped me in my vocation. Um, I'd have to think about that more to
Mhm.
try to find some things. What I would like to do is continue to teach through classroom settings, through videos and audios, and maybe even resurrect my music to do something part-time at night again.
Because you play how many instruments? I know you play guitar, you play the piano.
I used to actually, when I was younger, I was a bass player, lead singer for a rock band. And
Really?
yeah, yeah, in the Boston
Yeah.
area.
Okay.
Yeah, in Massachusetts. Um,
Do you want to
and
get in a band again? Is that something you would enjoy?
I think I would enjoy it if it's the kind of music that I like. I tend to like the old 60s, 70s music
Hmm.
that's in the genre of the Beatles and all of those bands that came that sounded similar in that era of time. Um, yeah, so that would be fun. But I love teaching. I love writing. I love hosting um, podcasts and
And what's the
radio
name of your
shows and TV.
podcast? I think we should share that right now.
Yeah.
One.
I have been hosting Beneath the Surface ever since 2003, and it's been a long time.
A
And
long time.
it started off as a local television show, and we did that for a number of years, about maybe almost a decade. And then I transformed it into a radio show, and I was doing local radio in Lowell WCAP. And when I moved from Lowell, I started doing, well, actually, maybe before I moved, but then I started doing podcasts because that became a popular thing on the internet. I guess video casts. What do you
Hmm.
call it? Are those
You know,
popularly called podcasts if they're video?
I I don't know what to call them. I
Okay.
really just don't, I make up things on the fly. That's in
Yeah,
I don't know, Paul.
there should be a course on like video internet language lingo.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. And probably you or I could write the course and make it up because I think most people just make this stuff up as they go anyway. I mean, is it really official? I don't know.
Anyway, if you
So,
want to see any of my work there, go to either paulmurano.com, and that's a U in Murano, like the car, paulmurano.com, no spaces, or my YouTube page, which is kind of fun. YouTube.com/, what is that? I think it's Veritas 3737.
okay,
That's Veritas, which is truth in Latin,
that's right.
Veritas 3737.
And I'm going to put those links in the show notes
Ooh,
so people can easily find those.
that would be
Now,
helpful.
you mentioned, Paul, you've taught a lot and you have taught philosophy and you have a love for philosophy. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and share right now that while we were together at Church Militant, while we were all working together, you hosted a weekly event at your house, Pizza
Mm.
and Theology. But there was some philosophy, woven in there too. So it was great. And
Mm.
Paul really likes to dive into deep subjects and dissect them and cause you to think, which is always a good thing. But I want to hear from you. Why do you think philosophy is so important? Because I feel like some people probably think, that's kind of a dead thing. It's a waste of time to take that. It's just a bunch of dead people's opinions or whatnot. What would you tell people who think that way?
Well, there's many ways to respond to that, but the first one that comes to my mind is that all of us are philosophers,
No.
all of us, and all of us begin as philosophers. What is a bit? You've had three children.
Hmm.
What is a baby's first words after mama, dada, and maybe no? What are their first words?
Well, I can remember my oldest child's was our dog's name.
All right,
That's probably not
except for
what you're looking for.
except for your dog's name.
After mom and dad, and
Yeah.
usually just dad. It's just pointing and saying that you're looking.
You're on the right track. Pointing and saying what? Every baby does this.
They are just like what or
There you go. There it
what
is.
what
Yes.
what's that?
Yes.
Yeah, I got it.
That's exactly what I was getting at.
Woo! I was afraid I was going to
Babies,
miss that.
babies are the best philosophers because the very first words we say as human beings is what and why. Every baby goes around the kitchen, says, "What's that? 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 What's that? What's that?" They want to know what things are. They're not content with just experiencing the things through their senses.
And even as they
And
get
just,
older, I'm just going to say, as a parent, kids will just wear you down with why,
then comes the era of why.
And I
After
did that
the
to my parents. It was always,
Yeah.
I told you so. They never wanted to
Yeah,
really
yeah. I was
give me a hard
I
answer.
was a huge why guy, and I was hated for it. But everybody begins the life with their whats and their whys. And what does what and why stand for? Meaning and purpose. What, why, meaning, purpose. What other
Ooh,
animal cares about meaning or purpose? Zero.
nice.
We are, by our very nature, philosophers. Every baby is a little philosopher. And here's the shame of human life, or one of the shames. Sin is the biggest,
Mhm.
but this is a result of sin. That once we start growing past childhood into adolescence, it begins to be washed out. The world begins to slowly seep in. And then all of these most important questions of our humanity and asking what and why about things are no longer important. And then eventually, after all of that self-consciousness of adolescence and, caring about the selfish needs and so forth, comes the era of making money. The
Mhm.
mind sort of narrows. How can I make a living? How can I make money, more money? And this is, of course, quote unquote success in the American dream. But it's a shame because that spiritual part of us that's ripe and that's glowing in us from babyhood forward is squelched out by the world, and we as a society allow that to happen. And I think education, formal education, does that masterfully.
Mhm.
It just doesn't ask the important questions. Why are we here? What are we doing? What's expected of us? What happens after we die? All of those big questions are not asked in most educational systems, and it's a
Well,
shame.
it is a shame, and I am going to kind of go back to what I was saying earlier. Now I'm thinking that parents have a significant role to play in this as well. I mean, how wrong, now I'm feeling bad about this. It is for us to constantly uh, to feel annoyed sometimes at our children's questions and to
Okay.
constantly say, no, no, I don't have time for that, just because I said so, stop asking so many questions. Or, we should look at those as opportunities to speak into
Yes.
our children's, lives at a young
Huge.
age, and
You're
to
forming them that way. Yeah.
exactly, and for them to flourish and to inspire them to ask more questions, to keep asking so they keep
Yeah.
growing. Because if you stop asking questions, I would think that's when you stop growing. You're no longer seeking truth.
I can't agree with you more. That's exactly the truth. And um, I was a, you know, my parents were frustrated with me too, as well as my brothers and sisters, because they thought I was stupid when I used to ask why about a lot of things. They were always give me the very surface answer. Well, this is why. Why can't you see that? But of course I knew that. I was delving beneath the surface, wondering why. I wanted to know the causes and the reasons why people were doing what they were doing and so forth. But they didn't, they never delved that way. And hence my the podcast that I have been hosting for, gosh, 20 over 20, yeah, over 20 years now, is called Beneath the Surface. And there's a reason for that. I think that we tap into our humanity when we go beneath the surface and tackle those, wrestle with those questions that people are avoiding like the plague today.
Do you find that most people who come to your program and watch, are they looking to go deeper? Are they seeking the deeper meaning within life, or are they coming to argue? Are they coming to, I mean, do most people really want to know truth? Are they seeking truth?
That's a great question. The rotating guest schedule that I've had over the years, they can relate. They love going beneath the surface, and that's what makes life fun, as well as enlightening. I've never had a huge audience because I don't think there's a humongous audience out there that really cares about the truth. Everybody has their own sort of preset understandings of things, agendas, if you will, or ways that they have been formed throughout their life.
Mhm.
And there's a whole lot of people that are uncomfortable if you challenge that, if you tap into that and ask questions about that. Because then, I mean, if they find out that it's wrong, or it's, there's falsehood to it, they have to sort of back up and begin again in a certain dimension of their lives. And a lot of people just too lazy, too comfortable.
Mhm.
As
Mhm.
Dr. Peter Kreeft says, one of the enemies of the spiritual life is comfort. Comfort and security, actually.
Mhm. And we all long for that so
Yeah,
often, that's something
yeah.
that we seek above all things sometimes. What would you say, or any thoughts on what someone can do who maybe they're finding themselves later in life and they're realizing, I've been caught up with making the money, taking care of the family, whatnot. And yeah, I used to be a seeker. I used to have questions. I used to, love knowledge and wisdom, and I want to get back to that. How
Mm,
how do you spark that, and how do you feed that? And
that's
I
a
don't
great question.
any
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, there's sort of an internal answer and an external answer. And the external answer, I am telling this to myself as well as other people, and that is shut the television off.
Hmm. Hmm.
Shut the computer off if you're not doing something important. Shut the cell phone off if you don't need to use it. The only way that wisdom is cultivated in silence, because that's the only way you hear God's voice is in silence,
Hmm.
and through other people, but very often in silence. We don't have silence anymore today.
No.
And I don't just mean like loud audible noise. I mean visual stimulation and everything else that goes with today's world. Relax and be silent. So that's something that would, I think, nourish this. Of course, the biggest internal answer to your question is ask for the gift of the Holy Spirit and His grace. Continue to ask for that, even if you don't know if you believe in God. Pray what they call the atheist or the agnostic's prayer, and that is something like, God, I don't know if you exist, but if you do, please give me some light. Give me some light and understanding so that I can go further with this and know you and love you if that's what you want. Something like that. The more that you ask God, Scripture says, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be open to you. It wasn't talking about a pot of gold. It was talking about the Holy Spirit and his gifts, because that's the gold, quote unquote, that endures forever.
And there is nothing more amazing, if you think about that, than to be able to know the God of the universe, the
Mm.
God who put the stars and the planets, into their perfect positions. We get to know him because he wants us to know him. He knows us. And
Yeah,
what a beautiful
yeah,
opportunity, invitation to get to know him. And I do believe, Paul, with what you said, that God will honor that prayer, from those who don't
yeah.
know him, but they're seeking. They want to know truth and they're willing to go wherever that leads. And
That's probably 85% of the spiritual life is wanting it, willing it, because God will do the rest if you
mhm.
allow him to.
All right, that is so good. And I'm thinking that's a good New Year's resolution would be to I'm going to be more silent coming up. I'm going to set aside time to be silent and to hear
Mm,
God's voice. And speaking of the new year, on
yeah.
New Year's Day, something very special happened in your world, right? That is when your book released. Wasn't
Ah,
it was it on New Year's Day?
yes, it
It,
was.
it was on New
Yes,
Year's Day, and let
yes.
me make sure I get the title right. I should have had it written down because my phone, it's the Devolution. I know what it is, but I don't want to. My of all times, my phone is acting up, and I hope you have a copy of it. I wanted to have a copy in hand during this interview so I could hold it up, but that didn't happen. The Devolution. I need glasses.
No, that's not the name of it, but yeah.
From a from a
Uh,
civilization of
uh,
life. I'm sorry, the devolution of society. From a civilization of life to a culture of death to an age of insanity. Now, if that doesn't
there you
grab
go.
attention, I don't know uh, what will. So tell us about this book. How long was it in the making? I know there's some spoilers in there. I don't know how far you want to go with it. So I'm just going to let you take it
Mm.
away and tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
the book.
well, first let's just talk about the title for a second. The title is The Devolution of Society, and it's a play on words with the word devolution, because in the title it's the word devil as in Satan dash ocean. So the
Mhm.
devolution of society, colon, and then comes the subtitle. From a civilization of life to a culture of death to an age of insanity. And I think everybody can relate to that. I mean, I think people are thinking
Oh,
to themselves, like, what the heck is going on today? I
yeah.
live in an age of insanity. And in a very real sense, many of the things that are going on today would have been found in an insane asylum 50 years ago, not out and promoted by the government, but that's what's happening.
Mhm.
As
Not
I
just our
said,
government, by the way. This is catching fire around the world, I would say.
yeah, yeah. Well, we're leaders of that, but yes, I would say definitely all of Western. This speaks of all of Western civilization, what used to be Western civilization.
Hmm.
In the introduction of the book, I mentioned that back in 1999, I wrote loosely what I would call a manuscript, and it was a dialogue between two people, two Catholics. And I imagined that one of the Catholics was out of commission for about 35 years. And I won't tell you exactly how I mentioned that in the book. Um, but he was, let's just say he was asleep for 35 years. They were two good friends. They were very good friends, and they went to war and so forth in 1965, the Vietnam War. And one of them was thought to be killed in action. But he was in a situation that I won't go into in detail right now. He came back and he met his friend 35 years later. Of course, he was not he was out of commission for 35 years, so he didn't know what went on. And so they catch up, after their reunion, they catch up, and they continue the dialogue as to, what has happened in the past 35 years from 1965 to 1999. Now, can you imagine all the things in life, socially and morally, that took place between those 2 years? A whole lot.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as I mentioned um, in the intro, I had finished that section of the book, which in the book now is section 1 out of 2. There are two sections in the book, two halves. That half I finished in the year 1999. That's when I wrote it. And it's in that section was called 1965 meets 1999. And it's basically somebody who only remembers life up until 65 to somebody who lived all the way through 1999, and their dialogue back and forth about what has happened in those years. And of course, the one who was out of commission is in shock in what he's hearing from his friend. But all of these crazy things that have been happening, morally deteriorating American society and Western civilization. I was working like as a director of education at certain parishes at the time, and I had given this manuscript out to people just to see what they thought,
Hmm.
because it was extremely un-PC. But I figured if I gave it to people who were working for the church, they would get it, or
Yeah,
at
they'd be
least
more receptive, you would think.
I
Yeah.
hoped they would get it, because nobody I knew personally would get it. So I gave it to them, and they didn't really get it. In fact, I sort of got maybe a little bit of the cold shoulder. Nobody really wanted to talk about it. And so I figured people aren't ready for this.
Yeah.
And I sort of I think I put it away, and I had lost the thing all the way up until this year. Well, this year is in 2023.
Hmm. Hmm.
My wife found it buried in some bin somewhere upstairs, that I had completely forgot about the thing. She read it and she said, "You have got to publish this. This is great. It really, really flows well, and it's amazing." So I said, "Oh, really?" So I read it again. I said, "Yeah, kind of sounds good." But then it's 2024 well, 23 at this time. So I
Uh-huh.
said, I can't keep the name of the book 1965 meets 1999. So what I did was I wrote a second half to the book, and that's part two. And that is called 1999 meets 2024. And what happened is the opposite. The other guy, the other friend who had been, awake throughout this whole time, he went out of commission for various reasons that the book talks about. He woke up 25 years later to the world in 2024, and he is in shock about what happened and how the world has gone from what he remembers as a culture of death to a culture of really insanity. He can't believe that people are actually believing what they believe today about sex, gender, relationships, abortion, politics, all of the things that we hear today that we sort of are beginning to take for granted. And so those two halves of the book are what the book is. The first half is 65 meets 99. The second half is 1999 meets 2024. And a lot of the things that we take for granted are talked about in that book, and it's enough for us to say, yeah, yeah, it's I'm I think I'm conditioned to this now, but if I look at it objectively, the way that these guys are looking at it, this is really bizarre.
Is it fair to say, I know you don't want to give too much away, and
Yes,
I understand why, but
yes.
is it safe to say that there is one primary thing that has led to the devolution of society? That if this one
Yes.
thing had not come into existence, that we would be living in a totally different world today?
Okay, the answer to your question directly is a one word, three-letter answer. Yes.
I thought you might say that, but
Absolutely. There is something that opened the Pandora's box that led from a civilization of life to a culture of death, which eventually led to our age of insanity. And of course, that is something that shouldn't be given away to someone who hasn't read the book.
that's right. I'm going to
Yeah,
ask you though, right now, does the book give us any hope, or can you give us any hope? Is
yeah,
there any going back?
yes. That's why I wrote the book, not just to say we're all doomed, but to say that this is what happened. So in order to fix something, you have to understand the how we got here in the first place. You
Mhm.
can't you can't cure a disease unless you know what the disease is. So what the book does is it enlightens us and it's a very easy to read dialogue between mainly two interlocutors that go back and forth, speaking to each other about these important things. But yes, by them delving beneath the surface together, they come up with the reasons and the ultimate Pandora's box that was opened that led to all of this. And it kind of says, wow, yes, this is how we got here. This is what we need to work on in order to get back to a level of sanity and a culture of life. And I think a lot of so-called pro-lifers that have good wills don't understand the underlying cause to the problem. And
Mm,
yeah,
mhm.
it's a huge problem that pro-lifers don't understand. And let me give you a somewhat of a hint to what I'm getting at. You will never end abortion by focusing on abortion.
Mm, that's quite a statement, and I'm
Yes,
sure it has piqued people's interest.
yes.
Um, I'm not going to ask you to go further because I don't want you to give this book away. Um,
There's a couple of things that absolutely demand abortion and brainwash people into condition them into believing that abortion is the only answer. But you will never end abortion by focusing on abortion. And unfortunately, a lot of pro-life organizations, that's all they do.
mm, very good, very good. Is there going to be a follow-up to this book? Do you see a follow-up in the making?
I think that's very possible. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe a futuristic book, 2024 meets 2042.
Ah, that would be interesting. And I will let you know, Randy got the
Hmm.
Kindle edition.
Oh
So
yeah?
I want the hard copy, so I plan to get that myself. So I
Yeah.
know
Well,
he's reading it.
well, I
Um,
think I think he will find it, and like everybody, a very easy read. It's not a scholarly book. It's not an academic book.
which is
It's
what
for
I
all,
thought you were working on all
yeah.
along.
Well,
Is okay, is this?
those are other things that I'm working on, but this particular book is very easy to read for any educational level. Kids can read it.
Oh wow.
Adults can read it. People who are looking, searching for meaning, searching for truth, should read it. I think people that are in the pro-life movements should read it, and people who are questioning their faith or want to delve deeper into their faith should read it. It's Did I tell you that I got a couple of key endorsements for the book that are in the testimonials in the back of the book?
I may have heard about that, but why don't you
All right.
share for the others? Yeah, I know this is exciting.
Well, my intellectual hero, I don't know if that's the right word, but who I respect the most intellectually, probably in the world, Dr. Peter Kreeft, gave me a testimonial on the book. I sent him the
Hmm.
manuscript, and he fell in love with it, and he wrote a really good thing. It's in the back of the book. I really, it's an honor for him to do that for me.
I
I
was going
used
to
to
say to
have
say
him.
no more, because others should, I know people recognize that name. That right there should tell you
Yeah,
you need to go get this book. But anyway, I'm sorry,
yeah.
Paul.
Well, he's a an old professor of mine. I used to have him for several classes when I was a graduate student a student at Boston College. Um, and he's into dialogue books, and that's what this is. It's very Socratic. If you ever read Socrates, his works are dialogues between often two people, and
Hmm.
they basically help each other delve beneath the surface to get to the truth together. It's not, arguments and dialogue should never be bad-willed. It should never be to win. It should always be to help each other get to the truth. And that's what this book does in a rather simple but profound manner.
I find so few people are able to dialogue anymore if they have opposing views. People
Yeah,
can only argue. That's my take anyway.
yeah.
Do you say that? I mean, that's what you observe as well, that people aren't interested in learning from one another, in actually helping someone else along. People just want to win their argument.
Big time. Big time. That's a huge problem. It's a result of original sin, but it seems to be particularly pointed today,
Mhm.
especially in our politics and religious discourse. Which of course are the only two things worth talking about. They say
Mhm.
that never talk about those two things in polite company. What else is there? What more important things are there?
We're
But
supposed to talk
you have
about
to do it.
football and,
Oh yeah, that's important too.
the
But
latest fashions, I guess. I don't know.
but
Nothing
yeah,
to talk
we
about.
we we need to. First of all, if you have confidence in what you believe in, then inviting a person, someone to follow reason, it should be easy for you. I think that's part of the problem. Most people really haven't, built their house on rock. A lot of people built their house on sand and straw, and they're fearful that to go beneath the surface to see what they find. It might not be something that they're interested in at this point in their life.
Well, and
But
a lot
yeah,
of people don't want to be embarrassed that they don't have the answers. Instead of
mm,
willing to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I am willing to look further into that and to get back to you with what I find out. And you and I will both learn something. I mean, you can
yeah,
handle those situations in a myriad of ways
totally, totally,
um,
and
that
we
keeps
we
the
need
discourse going.
totally. And we need to have that kind of humility. I mean, Socrates said that only fools believe they're wise, and it's the wise that think they're fools. So,
It's good. That's
yeah,
really good.
we, I'm a fool, and I think you're a fool.
I am a
Uh,
fool, big fool, capital F.
yeah, but if objective truth is the aim and the goal, that means winning an argument and self-pride are not.
Mm-hmm. I don't think self-pride leads anyone to heaven. It doesn't lead anyone to salvation. You're,
Happiness,
nothing. Really, your focus should always be putting the other person first. You know,
yeah, and
self
and and be,
last, the other person first. So.
and between you, the truth should be the goal, not to win an argument. Yeah.
Exactly. Very good. Very good. Well, I'm curious, Paul, you said when you first handed this manuscript out to people, you didn't get the reception you thought you would receive from people within the church. I'm curious. I know this book hasn't been out very long, so there hasn't been a time, a lot of time to collect feedback, but what are you hearing so far?
Well, like you said, there haven't been that many people that have read it so far, but the couple of few that I have heard really like it,
Oh.
really like it. Yeah. It's a challenge. It's a challenge to everybody because it probably will challenge your comfort zone.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and it's like I said, it's extremely un-PC in what it says, but deep inside, everybody knows it's true, pretty much. Deep inside. I mean, beneath all of the layers of worlds that we have been formed into, or deformed, that is.
So where do people find this book? Because I know,
Great question.
yeah, and people want to know.
Uh, it's on Amazon.com. So you
Mhm.
can find it on Amazon, or you could go straight to the publisher, which is Enroute Books and Media. That's EN Route, Route, Enroute
Okay.
Books and Media. But Amazon.com will get it for you. It's just look for either Paul Murano or the Devolution of Society, and you'll get there.
And I'm just curious, were there any challenges with writing the book? I put together a little book a long time ago, and there was much more to it than I realized. And of course, mine was just self-published, but it was still
Mm,
challenging. You still had to work with an illustrator and find an editor. And in my case, I was waiting on manuscripts from other people because it was a compilation of different people's stories.
uh,
Um, so any challenges in writing this book? After you found
I think a challenge is to be motivated to finish it. I think
hmm
that's a huge challenge that everybody has.
Yeah.
But I think perhaps the biggest challenge is to find a publisher that will publish it. A lot of publishers don't want to take a chance on something different. And my book is very unique, and
hmm
it's in dialogue form, back and forth, very easy to read. And you really have to, if you don't have if you're not published with other books, it's not always easy to find a publisher that'll take a chance on you. But keep trying, and I found a small Catholic publisher that's really good and is willing to.
So what are the other books? Just quickly before we wrap up here, you said you're working on some others, correct?
Yeah, I got another book called Refuting the Nonsense and Reclaiming the Truth. That is about basically a lot of it is about refuting how people um, uh, the 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 mentality and the way that the media and academia and now leftist government has sort of uh, has brainwashed or conditioned people to think, and it refutes all of their bad arguments about
Mm.
the basic things in life. Um,
Any idea
and
when that will be ready?
I don't. I'm giving it a little time. I'm giving this book a little time, and after that, I'll probably submit the other one.
Okay.
And then I've got a few others that sort of are almost maybe three-quarters finished.
That's fantastic. You have a
Uh,
number of books in your head, Paul. That's wonderful.
yeah.
I think most people have one, don't you think? A lot of people have one that they maybe like to write, but
Gosh, I have so many different ideas. Yeah.
well, now's the time to work on them before you land that next big
Yeah,
job that
that's
you
right.
want. And before we go, and I'm going to ask for people to just pray for you with, all of these
I appreciate it.
endeavors before you. But anything you want to add, as we wrap up our discussion? I'm so glad that you came on here, by the way, Paul. It's been delightful.
I'm glad to be here. It's an honor for me to be on your show. And I would say that, let's see, any last words? I feel like I have to say something wise.
Got to be profound. Something that will go on
Uh,
t-shirts everywhere.
I would say love God and do what you want, as Saint Augustine says. But doing what you want means doing His will. If you love God, you'll know His will and do His will, and that's the only time. That's the only way to find happiness in this life and the next. So,
Well, I'm going to say it may sound strange, but Paul, I'm glad you got laid off. I'm not going to say if I'm glad I was. Actually, I was, but I'm glad you did because it gave you time to work on some very worthwhile endeavors. And you
indeed,
certainly did not let the grass grow under your feet during these last handful of months. You allowed the Lord to work through you. I know in a number of ways, and one of which is finishing this book. And so I'm thankful that you had this time to work on it. And I will ask
and
people that they would keep the Muranos, in your prayers as they seek employment, seek a new place to live. They're reaching out across the country, parts of the country, looking for work, and that they sell their home quickly, and that the books, come out, and then you get great feedback on
mm,
the book that I think has a potential to be life changing if gotten into enough hands. can
I
definitely be
yeah,
life-changing.
I concur. And don't forget to go to my YouTube page and my personal website
And again, I'll have those links in the
and
show
and
notes.
subscribe, please. Yeah,
Yes,
please
subscribe.
subscribe.
I never ask people to do
That would
that. You're supposed to do that, you know?
Yeah, you know what? At the like my last few videos, I finally got the hint. You're supposed to say subscribe to my YouTube page, right at. So
And you're
I
supposed to do it
finally
at the
started.
beginning. I always do it at the very end if I do it at all.
Yeah, I do it at the end. Yeah, yeah.
No, by then you've lost half the people. I hate to tell you that, but
I know. That's true. I should do it at the
that's right
beginning.
at the beginning. We'll get it, Paul. We're going to figure it out. Anyway, well,
Sounds
thank you
good.
so much. You've been such a blessing, and you've been a good friend, and
Uh,
your wife as well. I didn't know if I was allowed to say her name on the air if she would like that or not. But anyway, I appreciate you both so much, and just
and she loves you, and we appreciate what you're doing here.
thank you, Paul. God bless.
All right.
Thanks for being on
So
the show. Bye bye.
God bless you.